hosting by the Simolek and with the important other stakeholders. Today we have three sections. The first section is assessment rubrics. This will be speak by two speakers, and the second one is gamification. There are three speakers. And then the third one is project module. Will be speak by two speakers. And the first one, I would like to introduce you the Mr. Eric Hendrik and Miss Ruth Romins from the in Holland University of Netherlands. He will speak about the assessment rubrics and apply in his universities. And the second one in this section for the assessment rubrics will be the second speaker is Valentina Tohan from the Binus International University in Jakarta, in Indonesia. This is what we say is the background of the speakers and some of the applied method of the rubric assessment rubrics in that university. And I would like also to inform to the speaker you have 15 minutes for one speaker for one university. So please arrange your time with the 15 minutes. One speaker, second speaker, and we have 20 minutes for the question and answer. This is you can see on the screen is Mr. Eric Hendricks is a full-time senior lecturer entrepreneurship in Holland. His educational background is business economics and innovation pedagogy. In 1999, he was one of the founder of the Retail and Entrepreneurship Education. Since 2001, he is the member of the National Platform of Entrepreneurship Educations. And the second one is Miss Ruth Romin. His specialty is using stimulation learning by the interactivity. So now we give the forum to our honored speakers. Mr. Eric, please, time is yours.
Could you hear? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We're going to conduct this webinar together with our friends from Binus. Later on some information about that one. But first let me introduce ourselves. This is Ruth.
I'm Ruth.
And my name is Eric Hendricks, and later on you will meet our dear colleague Valentina from Binus. We all are in this project. Since 2002 we have met we have cooperation with Binus, and the cooperation started always about the topic of improving our education, improving our relationship over and over. This project actually, the Independent project, started some years ago, and it's all about rubrics. It is the essential point of Independent projects is that we are looking for methods which are actually stimulating the student awareness of his own process. And for that actually we also have to know actually what we as teachers want to learn our students. We did some research. Actually our friends from Binus did some research on what is actually the need amongst Indonesian universities for this kind of topics. And based on that one, we decided actually to implement this method in several universities in Indonesia. Part of that startup phase was actually to organize a workshop, several workshops, in which we are piloting our methodology. As that was proven, actually, we also discussed with Simonet the way of how to disseminate it, and that dissemination will be realized by showing a video an animation video in which actually the whole rubrics will be explained. Further on, as this is just a part of our education, it's also very important to be aware of how your whole education is organized. So what in that perspective, we invited several groups of Indonesian.
Sorry, Eric.
Yeah. Yeah.
You cannot you can show your slide on our forum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please share your slide.
Where do we do it? Application, PowerPoint.
Can you see?
Yes.
Hello? Okay,
Yes.
good.
We got it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. You see, this also working with together. Eh? That's a very important thing. Eh? Okay, as mentioned, part of this one was also to visit in Holland, because a very important thing in this whole thing is to understand each other's concept of studying. How are you focusing the learning process of the students? Because that's actually our main audience. Eh? And the whole thing is actually because it's part of the whole education actually. So it's all about rubrics.
Yes, let's talk about the rubric.
Let's talk about rubrics. Okay.
What is a rubric, Eric?
Well, a rubric is actually a defined list of criteria in which you want to grade and score students. This is not applicable, let's say, to easy, more calculated, quantitative stuff, but more, let's say, to papers, projects, and tests. And as we are talking about higher education, a bigger part of our education is about more integral projects, more integral papers, more integral text, which actually is a combination about deeper ways of learning.
Okay, but why should students use rubrics? Why is it important for students to have rubrics?
Okay, if you think about why to use a rubric, it's very important that students, that we ourselves are understanding actually what we want to learn to our students. But more important is that students are able to understand their own learnings. So they have to know actually what is expected from them. What do they have to do? What do they don't have to do? What is the most important thing to prove in that test, paper or project? So it's all about that students are aware of what they are learning, how they are learning, but most of all what kind of parts they have to improve. Because it's all about students' self-responsibility in their learning. As we are training our students not to become, let's say, to be more a managerial role, so have responsibility, it's also in our own interest to learn them to be responsible for their own learning.
So it can facilitate also in peer review.
Yeah, it can be also in peer review. What we can see is actually that students can talk about the topic and discuss amongst them actually what is important, what is not important, how to formulate it, how to use knowledge, how to use skills.
And for teachers, why is it important for them?
Well, for teachers it's always very important to explain for themselves but also to others actually what they want to achieve with a certain lecture, what they want to achieve with a certain course, what they actually want to achieve with a certain paper, test or project. And it's very often that teachers are not working on their own. It's very often that teachers work together in education because we are all together forming the education. So it's also a way of discussing amongst teachers, what do I want my students to learn?
So they will develop a same kind of idea about assessing.
Indeed. They have the same idea of what, how, when, and to what we'll do in their education. So there will be a one common idea of how the education, how the course, how the project, how the test should be. So there's no confusion. There's no confusion actually amongst the students and also amongst the colleagues about what and how you are doing, and of course why you are doing it. And it gives also some consistency, because let's face it, to be honest, if we're talking about tests, about paperwork, there has a certain degree of being subjective in it. And this whole thing actually makes the assessment and the what, why and how are more objective. And that's actually a very important thing, to be objective, to have the same grading, to have the same understanding of the development of the students' work actually.
How do you create a rubric?
Well, it looks very easy actually, and could be easy, but it's very hard work. It all starts with the fact that you have to give a good thought about what is actually my goal, what do I want to achieve with my assignment, with my paper, with my, you name it. So actually, what do you want to learn? What are the objectives of learning? And that actually is easy said, but then again, it's hard to make that into words. So you have to look for that discussion amongst learning objectives, and that will be a big part of your time actually. The other time will be that you have to choose actually what kind of rubrics do you want to have. There are several types, but we have now today only time for going through one of these types. And then again, if you know what to learn, but when are you talking about they have learned enough or insufficient or even perfect? So it's about defining actually the criteria.
So let's take a look
Yes.
to the rubric.
Yeah. So we designed our small rubrics and we are now focusing to this one, looking at this one. This is an example. We can have 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3. But again, we wouldn't advise you 2 or 3. 4 is out of research turned out to be a very good one. And you see that we have given it points, 8, 6, 4 and 0 points. That also can be discussable. This is a matter of example. One easily can say 9, 5, 3 or 0. But anyway, that's it. Then you have over there on the left side, you have these assessment criteria, 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't make it too many, don't make it too small, because too small will also be very hard to actually assess.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have to go on. Let's look at a chocolate chip cookie.
Yes, this is an example which we use actually in our workshops, because this is actually, everybody recognizes the chocolate, everybody knows, likes the chip cookie, but again, cooking, baking it and eating, that's the whole thing. Eating is not the problem, but baking is the problem. So when we had this workshop done, well, okay, it's good and bad, but then what's good and what's bad? So we discussed over and over with our friends, actually, when are we talking about good, when are we talking about poor, and when it is delicious.
That's,
well, there's
may I?
Yeah,
Because
sure,
we
sure,
don't
sure.
have
Yeah.
a lot of time anymore. What I see here, it's about products, not about what students are doing.
Yeah, this is actually the result of a process. So what you actually now are assessing is not the process, but more the result of a process.
Yeah.
And that's a very good thing to remember, because it's very often not only the product that counts, but more often, especially in our education, the process is a very important thing to talk about. So let's go to, and if we talk about the process, then it's all about the level of thinking, the level of understanding. But maybe you can tell something about this Bloom taxonomy.
So it's not about how we do accomplish things, but how we describe what they are doing and what do we expect from students. And here you see the different kinds of knowledge. So the first one is to remember, and the best one is how to create. Here they have to design, to assemble, and here you see also the verbs which can help you to describe all the different kind of levels in your rubric. So we have so it's not about accomplishing things, but how they are doing. It's about accomplishing things and not about products.
So what we can see, for instance, that the remember and understanding is very much being used actually at the start of the education. But the more and more they're going to the bachelor level or even higher, actually, the more and more we're going to go to this phase of analyzing, evaluating, or even create. And then again, it gets hard to assess these kind of things. Okay.
So here we have a rubric, and the learning outcome is the students able to write a paper and to reflect on it. Okay, but we have to split it up in certain criteria on the left side. Dus there we say the student is able to explain issues. And then we can see when it's excellent, strong, satisfactory or emergent. And you can see all the different kind of knowledge within this rubric. So, yeah, the students develop content, provides basic insight into concepts. Yeah, and the student provides thoughtful insight into concepts. It means he's thinking with it. And then the strong one is the student shows an enriched understanding of concept and that's the important thing, distinctions among them. So you have to really describe when are you satisfied with this criteria.
So what we normally do when we are making this kind of rubrics is that we first define amongst us actually as teachers what is actually are the topics which we want to assess on. What are the learning objects? For instance, developing content. Okay, but what then again is content? That we have a common understanding this one. And if a student just shows some basic insights, so some basic material, then we are not satisfied. So the student knows that only by supplying actually, by delivering actually only this basic knowledge, we're not satisfied. He has to use actually thoughtful insight. Yeah.
Okay.
Thoughtful insights into the concept. And if we are saying, well, that's actually what's the minimum which we want to have, that's okay. But then again, students can discuss amongst themselves, okay, but is it now that I get them insights, or can I even make it more clearer, or can I enrich it, or can I make distinctions amongst the concepts? And that actually helps the student to think about, okay, what did I deliver?
So I think we are on time now.
Okay.
This is the end of our last.
Okay, and now we would like to go over to Ibu Valentina. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you very much, Eric and Rhodes, for your presentation. We will go to the next presentation, but please stay with us to the question and answer. Now, the second presenter, this is Mrs. Valentina Tohan from the Binus International University, Jakarta, Indonesia. So, time is job, please.
Okay. Good morning, friends in Europe, and good morning, friends in Indonesia. Can you hear my voice clearly?
We can hear, but your slide we cannot see.
Okay, thank you.
Please share with us. Okay, thank you. We get it.
Okay, can you see my screen as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Please
So
click the play one.
Yeah. So basically here I'm Valentina with my two students. I come with my student Fabio and Shelly. They are from the...
Oh. Hello. Valentina, your camera is open. Where's your camera?
Hang on 1 second. I'll just check first.
And your slides, please click play show. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you see our faces now?
It's still in process.
Okay. Before we start, I would like to also introduce my two students. My name is Valentina. I'm the lecturer of the Accounting and Finance program of Venus University International. I am here accompanied by my two students, Fabio and then Shelley. They are from the 5th semester of the Accounting and Finance program. So basically,
Miss Valentina,
yes.
we cannot see your face and also the slide.
Okay, let me just check first.
Thank you.
Can you please confirm when you can see it?
Yes, the slide. It's not slide, it's webinar. Yes, please slideshow. Yes, and then your picture on the top of the left side.
It's actually shown on my screen, but I don't know why it's not. Hold on 1 second.
Internetnya. Jadi bagaimana? So we do to the low bandwidth local computer.
Yes, I think that is because you're low local bandwidth. That's why it's not on the screen. But actually, we can see our faces on the screen.
Okay.
Is that okay now? Shall I start?
I think it's okay, your presentation, but more better we can see your face.
Okay. So can you see our faces now?
No, not yet.
I think I should just start, but then later on we'll try to figure out how these things work, because otherwise we are going to run out of time. Is that okay?
Okay, please continue your presentation.
Okay, so let me just start again. So basically, we are here from Venus University International. We are going to share about our progress. As previously mentioned by Eric, this was started back in 2012. And then since our accounting and finance program is one of the program that is also internationally accredited by one of the European foundation, which is the FMD. So from 2012, we are starting to use our rubrics in a full manner. I mean, like 100% of all the subjects in our courses of the accounting and finance program, we are using rubrics. And then the way we use rubrics for exams, which is the midterm exam as well as the final exams. On top of that, we also use our rubrics for the projects and assignments. Probably you can see in our screen that we gave some examples of the subjects that have been using rubrics. Subjects like accounting theory, financial accounting 1, 2, accounting computer package, research methodology, and so on and so forth. So basically, if you're from accounting program, you can see that actually these subjects are the core courses subjects which needs analytical thinking. So in my opinion, as one of the lecturer of the accounting, by using rubric, it helps us actually to set up the certain criteria for our students. And then when we conduct parallel classes, it also helps me as the lecturer to be fair in giving the grade to our students. Besides that, probably I can also show the rubric that I have used in the class in a format of Excel file. Can you see the Excel file there? Okay, so basically this is one of the example. If before Eric and Ruth have used an example of choco chip baking processes, this is one of the example of the rubrics that I use in my class for the financial accounting subjects. So basically what I do is here, what is the intended learning outcomes? And then after that, those questions I have put into the assessment indicators. So for that assessment indicators, as also previously explained, we set up the criteria for poor, average, good, and excellent. So into each bracket of criteria, we formulate what are the points that we will be given to the students when they are answering our questions. From there, every now and then, every time I score my students, I write down their name and I assess them using this score. So I come up with, just have a quick one, sorry. I come up with this one. So the whole intended learning outcome assessment indicators, each student's name, what are the score that they've got, and then what is their total or final score. So when I did the rubrics, it does take me some time to develop this, but at the end of the day, when I score all of my students in the class, it helped me a lot to ensure that I do fair in score them, and I also consistent in providing their score within the assessment indicators. So I think that's pretty much from me as a lecturer, and in this occasion, I would also like you to hear some sharing from my students. They might also have different ideas on how the rubric itself is actually used in the class. So next one will be Fabio will give some sharing about his experiences in class with the assessment rubrics. Please, Fabio.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? Okay, I'll just move on. So basically I have here one of the examples of rubric that was given to us in the middle of the class. And it gives like what Mr. Eric stated previously in the previous presentation. In terms of us as students, it helps us to understand what the lecturers expects from us. And like he also said previously, it is mostly used in exams, project, and also presentation. And that was the case that happened to me in the class a few weeks prior. So, like for example, if you want to get an excellent mark or an A, the lecturer expects you to not only, in this case, the accounting theory, they want you to identify some issues inside a journal article. If you simply identify the article score, and if I were aiming for a higher grade, for example, an A in excellent, I would have to not only identify the issues, but I also have to identify the accounting issues relevant to the issue stated on the paper, but also arguments that may be mine or others. So yeah, so far that is one of the few examples of experiences I've had using the rubric so far.
Okay. So do you still remember when was your first class using rubric? When you were in which semester pretty much?
The earliest ones, yeah.
The earliest, okay. So we have used the rubric since our earliest semester students. We've introduced the use of rubric since then. Do you have kind of like feedback that you can give on as well about the use of our rubrics in the class probably? That probably can be also a lesson learned for some other colleagues in Indonesia or Europe?
Not really, because you've basically given everything that it's pretty clear. The rubric itself is pretty straightforward and it's pretty clear. So I don't see anything that could enhance this the rubrics.
Okay, thank you then. What about Shelley? Probably the question will be on how Shelley used the rubric and then translate it into your expectation. For example, Fabio before mentioned about the good and the excellent. So how do you translate the rubric that was given? Was that given initially by the lecturer before the assignment or the project?
Yes.
Okay. So it's pretty much, not pretty much, it was given before the project or assignment in the class. And then let's hear from Shelley.
So for example, in one of the classes, we were given a case study and also assessment rubrics are provided by the lecturer. So during the planning stage, in order to determine the outline of my assignment, I usually use the assessment rubrics as a guidelines in order to provide me instructions and also ideas about what should I include in my assignments. And then moreover, after doing my assignment, I will then get back to the assessment rubrics and also compare the rubrics with my assignments in order to determine whether I have fulfilled all of the criteria stated in the rubrics excellently. For example, in one of our courses, which is financial accounting, there is a case study in which the indicators in order to get full marks is that you have to identify all issues, all accounting issues, and also relate it with accounting standards. So after finishing my assignment, I will then compare it with the rubrics whether I have fulfilled all of the criteria excellently. And if I have not fulfilled the criteria, I will then start to modify my assignment again until I think that I'm able to excellently fulfill all of the assessment indicators.
Okay, thank you. So since you're talking about the financial accounting, which is something in the past, then what about the result? Was that your expectation, something that you translate from the rubric into your assignment? When you got the score from the lecturer, is that what you expect? Or is that coming up at, with something that are out of your expectation, for example?
I think it is expected, and more for the lecturers while giving our scores, we also explain about what part in the assessment indicators that we are lack of.
Okay, so pretty much that something that also I can probably summarize. So at the beginning in BINUS, if it is related to project and assignment, we have given the rubrics in advance. So that case, we also give what kind of expectation, what kind of criteria that we would like our students to be able to achieve. So if students come up with questions, we also give them detailed explanation. If there are probably keywords or there are certain criteria that something that they basically anything that they don't understand, we can always explain to our students. In the same time, we also give them some examples. For example, if this is the example, what will you answer? So from the answers of our students, and then we also ask them to learn together. From your answer, what score do you think you will be able to achieve, for example? So that way, we also can measure whether the lecturer's understanding and the student's understanding are at the same level. So that's for assignment and the project. For the mid-exam or the final exam, normally we also, as I previously showed in the Excel file, we also use the rubric, but we show our students the rubrics when they come to us with some, for example, curiosities or uncertainty or questions, for example, like how could I get 45 when I think I am able to answer, for example. Or they just out of their curiosity, out of their 90-something score, they want to know how could I get into that score. So if there are students come to us and ask that kind of questions, you are able to show our students, okay, these are the file, then these are all the criteria, and this is how you answer, and this is how your friends are trying to answer as well, for example. So I think that's some of our sharing about the use of rubrics in our program, Accounting and Finance, which have used it 100% in all the courses. And at the same time, all other programs in BINUS University International, they also have used rubrics, even though not all of the courses have used it. But in the next, or in the short term, we are actually heading to all programs to be able to use all the rubrics fully. I think that's from us.
Oh, okay, thank you, Ms. Valentina and your students. Now we finish our first sections. There are some questions. So you see on the what is the message from the audience regarding the assessment method presented in the rubric. It is true that solely based on the objective and set the lecture. For example, in the sample you exhibit paper content is clear. Isn't the subject 10 points? So how to develop assessments? This is from Batam, and the second one also from Batam. Without develop subjective assessment statement, or it is possible. And from Aggie, you see, dear Ruth and Eric, I want to ask question: what essential criteria for companion the dimension should need to be raised in the assessment rubric? And then from the Juvencia, Unita, Bu Valentina, who is the
Yes.
greatest challenge? This is the question for you. What is the greatest challenge you face to so far when the implementation the rubric? And then from Janti, Desi Janti, from I'm sorry, I know. And then the last question, what are the advantage and disadvantage of different type of rubrics? Okay, please answer. Maybe I ask Eric first for answer, and then after that, Valentina.
Well, I hope I understood correctly the questions. Yes, it is, because one of the questions was about being subjective, being sensitive. I understood it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
You can see the question on the message.
Yeah, we do see, but some are in Indonesian, so it's a bit tricky to explain sometimes.
Yeah, yes.
About okay, let's go into the word of the subjective part. We think that for fair judgment, all students should have the same criteria and the same dimensions being measured or being assessed, better to say so. It shouldn't depend on what kind of teacher, what kind of momentum, what kind of anything actually, how he's being assessed. In order to achieve the fact that students are marked in the same way, and also the students have an understanding of what they should perform, there should be one objective thing in it. So and of course, teaching is a little bit about being subjective because that's the teaching part. But if you look at the process of the student and look at the outcomes of the student, that actually should be very objective as much as possible. And for that reason, I think the best way is actually then to make this criteria. And
use the taxonomy of Bloom.
Yeah, and use the taxonomy of Bloom in order to make the learning outcomes actually as explicit and more objective as one can see. And certainly there will be some topics actually which could be sensitive or subjective, but then it's our goal not to be subjective, but it's our aim to be objective, because in teaching you should teach in spite of everything. It should be for the students what you are doing, and he or she has to develop themselves. So that must be not connected to you, but to be connected to him, because he should develop. So in that sense, this gave us a lot of help in clarifying to each other's, and each other's is towards colleagues, but also to students, about the whole process of learning, because in learning not the outcome is important, but the process is maybe even more important. And the students should understand that, and especially in education, I think that if you look at the students of the future, they should be more and more responsible for their own performance. And it starts actually by being have a certain kind of self-reflection on what they do, how they do, and when they are doing it. And in that way, rubrics can help in this process. I hope I answered a little bit of your question. Pa?
The second question was, what are the advantage and disadvantage of different type of the rubric?
Wat zijn de voor- en nadelen van de verschillende types van rubrics?
Yes.
It depends on your assignments. Yeah, for instance.
Well, the advantages are actually,
Yeah, you have an analytic, then you are more specific. You have a more holistic, but it really depends on your assignment.
Oh, yes.
but to be clarified, be very honest, in preparing rubrics in the beginning, as Valentina also explained very nicely, is that it takes a lot of time actually to make them and to start working with it. But on the long run, it helps your students to understand actually what they are learning. So in the long run, actually, the students take responsibility for their learning and have insights in their learning. And in the long run, that actually is the benefit of it all. And for you as teachers, in the long run, it will be time effective. If, for instance, if you look at our university, in which we make rubrics for a certain course, which has been taught by 25 teachers, then actually a lot of work has been done by a few students. For a few teachers for a lot of teachers actually. So in that sense, it's time effective. And also for, let's say, for review reasons, when students come back and discuss with you why they did the grade that they have, that's easier for you as a teacher and for you as a student to understand actually why the grade is the grade that you have. And one of the other questions actually was from high school, and for high school actually it also works over there. It doesn't matter what kind of education you have, it works for all kinds of educations. And the point is actually that in higher education, I think the understanding and the remembering is much more applicable than, let's say, the creating and analyzing part.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we go to the Miss Valentina. Can you answer to several questions from our audience?
First one, which is the reference to help on developing rubrics. So basically, we refer to the Bloom taxonomy here, and also we've gone through some workshop with Eric and Ruth team. And then on a daily basis, every time we have problems, in BINUS we have the academic development department, a place where we can actually ask questions if we are unsure. And as of the culture here in BINUS, we also help each other. So for example, I have issues or I have kind of like uncertainty on how to develop my rubrics, I can always talk to my colleagues. So here we develop what we call as, I'm not sure what's the right term, but because we are very collegial, so when we up to a certain discussion, like for example on how to develop rubrics, we can also refer to each other. And then the next one is about the advantage, disadvantage, and the greatest challenge. So basically, also before answered by Eric, and also previously highlighted in our presentation, the advantage is, in my own opinion, advantages is more compared to the disadvantages. So advantages are things like, for example, I've mentioned about I become more consistent in when I do the marking. And then, for example, in a type of analytical questions. It allows me to appraise the student's process instead of the end result. And then the other things also, it helps me to understand what are the intellectual level of my students. So every time, for example, if next year I want to develop the same questions and the same rubric, I always can revisit what have been happened in the past, for example. What are the challenges, what are the issues that was faced by the student? So even in the class, I can, for example, giving sort of emphasis of their difficulties when they provide answers in the exam from last year, for example. That's the advantages. Disadvantages are actually more into time management, because also previously mentioned, the challenge in on how we develop the rubric at the first place. But when we know, when we are up to the level of, we sort of like grab the feeling of developing the rubric, it speed up the process when we do the scoring, when we do the marking for our students. And on top of that, what we also believe is, because the idea of providing rubric is for the sake or for the benefits of our students. So we are trying actually to what do you call it, to understand that instead of how busy I am later on when developing rubric. So we are starting to think from the angle that this will benefit the students. Hence, we have to somehow allocate our time to develop the rubric. And then there was also one question about the fairness in assessment. The question saying, how does the rubric ensure the fairness in assessment of all students? I think the easiest way to explain is, when, let's say, we have to grade 50 students, with, let's say, we have 5 questions of exams, and then in the middle of the time we are doing our grading, we still have to do some multitasking. We need something on paper, black and white, to keep remind us of where we were up to and what have been given to previous students, for example. So by using that examples, I think that's how we ensure on how we can actually make fairness in assessment of all students. I hope that answers. There are 4 questions before. Yeah, challenge, disadvantage, advantage, and fairness in assessment. Anything else, Pak?
This is what we say, how can we use the rubric to assess the students' creativity, to make their storyline, what is the indicator?
Okay. If it is about creativity of the students, what important is, if we are going back to the example that was given by the Eric, we have to look at what is the learning objective actually. Learning objective, we have to clearly define what is the objective. Do we assess creativity, or do we assess the process of baking, or do we assess the taste of the choco chip cookies, for example? So any kind, I mean, like any types of soft or hard skills can be assessed, as long as we determine the learning objective clearly. So when we tell our students, we clearly explain that we are going to assess your creativity. For example, later on, the criteria for creativity is, for example, 1, you just follow the rule, for example. Second, you come up with lots of examples. Those criteria will be developed from the learning objective itself. So I think on how to answer that, any kind of hard or soft skills can be assessed as long as the learning objectives and criteria are clear.
Before the class question, where can I get the document that was presented? we will upload to the website of Semolec. You can go to the website www.semolec.org. Yes.
Okay.
And I think we answer all. So I would like to say thank you to our 4 speakers from the Rubric and Valentina. Thank you very much for your presentation and hope to see you sometime again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.